Scrolls help to confirm the accuracy of the Old Testament Scriptures. We found manuscripts that dated back 1,000 years or more than we presently had in 1947. And when they compared the two, the accuracy was unbelievable, wasn't it? So it showed that for 1,000 years, the copying of the Old Testament Scriptures had been unbelievably accurate. And that helps us to know that we have the Hebrew Old Testament Scriptures today. And as long as they are translated accurately for us, then we have what? We have the Word of God. Well, I got to thinking as I was preparing, I wanted to stop just for one lesson, and I want us to talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls. How many of you have ever really done a study of the Dead Sea Scrolls? Got one lady. And most individuals have never done much of a study about the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now what I'm about to give you is very brief, okay? It's just a highlight of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and maybe it'll pique your interest just a little bit, and you might go and do a little bit more study. There are books and books and books written about the Dead Sea Scrolls if you want more information about it. Let's start with the location of the Dead Sea Scrolls, okay? The very first map that you have, and again, I want to interject here that I don't want you to get too comfortable with color pictures in my outlines, okay? Just be aware of that, okay? That's very rare. And I know, that next thing you want is cartoons or something, okay? And so just be aware. But notice that first map. It's a huge map. The reason I wanted this map huge is so that you can kind of see exactly where Palestine is located, or Israel, okay? And if you look dead center of that first map, you see a little red dot, don't you? Guess what that is? That's Israel. So that gives you some perspective with regard to Europe and Africa and Asia and the Middle East and things of that nature, exactly where Israel is on the map, okay? Now, drop down to the second map, and what you have is a picture of Palestine itself, okay? So this is now an enlarged picture of that little red dot, and so now you can see exactly where Israel is. And the thing that's interesting is, and the thing I want you to note is, you see right in the center of that map is the Dead Sea, okay? The Dead Sea. And if you look off to the left, how is that labeled? It is referred to as the West Bank. You ever hear of that today? You hear a lot about the West Bank in the news, and how there's always fighting along the West Bank and for the West Bank, right? And so just be aware of that's where we're talking about. I flipped your page just a little bit. Okay, boy, we're flying through this lesson, aren't we? Now what we've done is we've gotten even closer, and we focused in right there on the Dead Sea, and at the northwest side of the Dead Sea is an old archaeological site by the name of Qumran. You see the red dot there? Qumran. Folks, it's right in that vicinity that we find where the Dead Sea Scrolls were located, okay? Right around that particular area of Israel is where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. In fact, they were found in 11 caves. Okay, 11 different caves. And the picture that you have just below that shows about 7 of those caves and their location in and around what is known as the Qumran community. Now remember, that is an archaeological site now. There are no individuals living in the Qumran community. However, you'll hear about the Qumran community as you study the Dead Sea Scrolls quite a bit. So That gives you a little bit of an idea of where they are. We'll come back to the picture where the caves are, and I'll show you a picture of the caves in your outline as well. Okay? Any questions or comments as far as the location is concerned? Okay? We'll come back and talk a lot more in detail about what was found. Now, there are 3 huge areas of study that we could go into with regard to background information on the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, now see, this is what happens. You think you got an easy subject, and then all of a sudden you start studying, and guess what? You got to study even more. Okay, and so I've gone back and I've just given you some brief information on these 3 areas. Notice first of all the Essenes. Okay, the Essenes. They are the ones who lived in the Qumran community, folks. Okay, the Essenes. They were a sect of the Jews, and they are not ever mentioned in the New Testament. Okay, the Essenes. They were, what were some of the other sects of the Jews? Anybody know? Pharisees, Sadducees, Zealots, Herodians. Okay, those were some of the sects, and the Essenes were another sect of the Jews. Okay, now notice when they flourished. They flourished from about the 2nd century BC until the end of the 1st century. Okay, and there's a reason why they didn't last long. Well, after AD 70, and we'll talk about that more in just a little bit. Notice the next point. They claim to have succeeded, okay, from the, have you ever heard of this guy? Zadok. You ever heard of him? Okay, Zadok at one time was the high priest of Israel. Okay, and they believe that they have seceded from the Zadokite priesthood. They enjoyed a communal life. That's why you find this little community of them, and there were pockets of them all over Israel and in a large part of the world at that particular time. They weren't very many. Okay, just little communities here and there, and this is a little Qumran community of these individuals. They practiced asceticism and celibacy, and one of them settled in the Qumran community of Palestine. Notice this, the Dead Sea Scrolls are believed to be from their library. Okay, from their library. And they were extremely good at copying the Old Testament Scriptures, folks. Okay, remember we said that there was a lot of copying that had gone on. Well, here's a group of individuals that made it their practice to just copy the Old Testament Scriptures. Okay, so there's a little bit about the Essenes. Now, they settled in Qumran. Okay, and you can see that again on your map up at the top of the page where they were located. It's located about 1 mile off the northwest shore of the Dead Sea and about 13 miles east of Jerusalem. Okay, so very close to the capital city of the Jews. It has been an archaeological site for a long time. They found the Qumran community in about the mid-1800s. Okay, so that's been, man, we're approaching 200 years that we've known about this Qumran community, okay? But it wasn't heavily worked on until a man by the name of Roland Deveau began major work in 1947. And there's a reason for that, okay? Why it became such a popular community in 1947. As they did their dig and began to uncover all the stuff, what they found in the Qumran community were 2 big buildings, one bigger than the other. And in the community was a water system that was there. They would go out and they were able to bring water into that community and keep it inside their city walls. Okay? There's also a huge cemetery that is there that was found. Okay, so those are the 4 predominant things that were there. 2 big buildings, a huge cemetery just outside of town, and also a water system that they found. Okay, the population ranged from around 170 to 200 people. So again, not a huge population of people. Remember, what kind of life did they like to live? Yeah, that little communal life, okay? Seems like they got out of Jerusalem and we just want to get over here and be all by ourselves, okay? So a group of Essenes were over there living by themselves. The caves in and around the area, those 11 caves and others, appear to be where they would house themselves. So guess what they really were? Cavemen, yeah, cavemen and women, okay? Even though it was a life of celibacy and asceticism, there were men and women who made up the Essene community, okay? But they couldn't they couldn't populate themselves very well, okay? Not practicing celibacy. The ruins turned up pottery, coins, writings, and watch this, numerous inkwells. Yes, sir. Oh, okay. Guys, somebody's going to have to give these out. I can't get out there and give them all out to people. I'll be giving them out for the next hour. Raise your hand if you need one, okay? Notice point 8 again. It is believed that this community very seriously copied ancient documents, especially the scriptures of the Old Testament. Okay, so you've got the Essenes living in the where? Qumran community, and notice the next point, the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. Folks, was the fall of Jerusalem predicted by Jesus? Yes, Matthew chapter 24, Jesus teaches about the fall of the city of Jerusalem, that it's coming. And He's warned Christians about this event's going to happen. It started and the heat began in about 66 AD, 4 years before AD 70. There was a group of Jews who rose up in rebellion. They call it the revolt of the Jews against who? Against Rome. Folks, you just don't do that. Okay? But they rose up in rebellion. They didn't like the Caesar. They didn't like the taxation. There were just many things that they didn't like. The taxation was the biggie. Okay? So they rose up in revolt. Well, you think Rome's just going to let you revolt? No, Rome isn't just going to let you revolt. So they rise up and they head over into the vicinity of Jerusalem and Judea. Okay? And they start trying to put down this rebellion. They enter into the city of Jerusalem and they are not successful. The Jews are strong enough to finally thwart the Romans and get them out of the city of Jerusalem again. Okay? But Rome isn't going to have that. Okay? You Jews are in rebellion. You are our subjects. And guess what? You will submit. Now, there were like 3 different rulers who were supposed to have gone to Jerusalem to overthrow it. And every time, something kept happening. Okay? Finally, the Roman general who is dispatched was a man by the name of Titus. Okay? Titus rises up, comes to the city of Jerusalem at AD 70 and overthrows the city of Jerusalem. The temple was completely annihilated. And it was during this 4-year stretch, okay, that the Qumran community also came under fire of guess who? The Romans. Okay? Now, were the Romans Christians in any sense of the term? No. Were the Romans Jews in any sense of the term? No. Okay. They were not either group religiously. Now, what did these Essenes have in their possession? We got Old Testament documents. We got all kinds of ancient documents. And when they knew the Romans were getting near, they took all of these documents and all of these copies that they had made, and guess what they did? They stored them in the caves where they lived. Now remember, they've got a little town, right? The Qumran town, okay? And so Rome, are they looking for caves? They're not looking for caves. All they're doing is come in, we're going to annihilate this little community, and they did. And the Essenes, however, were smart enough to hide all of those scrolls, all of their writings in those caves. Now, what year did I say that was? About around AD 70, 66 to 70, okay? When were they discovered? 1947. 1900 years. Guys, 1900. Do you know how long that is? You know, that's older than some of y'all. We won't talk about which ones. Okay? But that's a long, 1900 years. There's these documents containing Old Testament scriptures that nobody knows about. Unbelievable, isn't it? Unbelievable. All right. Let's get down to the meat of this discussion. Okay? That's just introductory stuff. Okay, the location of them, and then a little bit of the background information and why they were hidden. Let's talk about the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls themselves. Okay, this area is very arid. Okay, and very hot. It's about 1,300 feet below sea level. Okay, guys, did you know that the Dead Sea is the lowest place on earth? Okay, it is the lowest place on earth and probably at times the hottest place on earth. Okay, and so this little community is only a mile from what? From the Dead Sea. Okay, 1,300 feet below sea level. The individuals who live in around the area, they are just farmers and farm-type people, agricultural-type people, shepherds even, okay? And there was an occasion when these shepherds were out and they were walking near the Qumran community, and one of them, he just picks up a rock, sees an opening in the mountain there, and he just goes, threw a rock in there. And guess what he hears? He hears something just shatter. And he thought, wow, that's wild. Okay? And so he and his two compadres, his two shepherd friends that were with him, they were in their teens, around 18 years old at the time, very young guys. Okay? They enter into that cave. They get in there, and guess what they find? Pots. All kinds of pottery. Okay? Tall ones, little ones, fat ones, all kinds of pottery. And what had happened was he threw that rock, hit one of those pots, and it shattered it. Okay? So they started looking at the pots and looking in the pots, and guess what they found? All kinds of scrolls and all kinds of little pieces of scrolls. Okay? In that particular cave. That was in 1947. If you look at the picture there are the three men. They're now grown. Okay, they didn't get them when they were teenagers. They got the picture when they were older, but those are the three men that found the original Dead Sea Scrolls, entered into what is referred to as cave number 1, and found the very first collection of these Dead Sea Scrolls. Now flip the page. Okay. You see the pots there, right? That's what the pots look like, all different kinds of sizes and stuff. And notice, you see those holes in the cave or in the mountain there? That's where they lived. You think you got a hard time getting in and out of the front door. How'd you like to climb up and down and around in those things? Okay, let's go home, kids. Okay, you got to shimmy down that slope to get in that opening, okay, because that's where they lived. But that's where those all these pots are. You see about 5 different holes in this particular picture, and those are all caves and where they would store these pots, okay. What year did we say they made the discovery? 47. Folks, this is when this man by the name of Roland DeVal became very interested in this area of the country, okay? And up until this time, even the Qumran community had not been excavated very well, okay? But now they know we've made a major find, okay? I'm talking about a huge find. And notice the years there, guys. 47 to 56, 9 years. They worked diligently on the Qumran community and also going in to these particular caves and trying to find what was in those caves. That's a long time, isn't it? 9 years of work. And we're not talking about just one or two people, okay? Once an archaeological find is made and the geologists and all get interested in it, sometimes there can be hundreds of people that storm an area in order to do the work that's needed to be done. Okay, teams go in over and over and over. And so for about 9 years, they did the excavation. Now, how long had these things been in there? 1,900 years? That's a long time. Now, one of the questions that we might ask is how in the world did these particular ruins survive 1,900 years? Folks, it's the arid conditions, the dry conditions of this particular place, and the fact that they were in pottery, closed up, and it protected them. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away. Who said that? Jesus did. Folks, remember one of the things that we taught at the beginning of this lesson, or at the beginning of this course, is that the providential hand of God was involved in this process, okay? Preserving the manuscripts of the Word of God so that mankind would know that we have the truth, okay? And I believe God's involved in this, don't you? Here the Romans are. Folks, if the Romans had found those, guess what they had done? They destroyed them. They ransacked the city of Jerusalem. They totally, completely annihilated the temple that was in Jerusalem. Okay? And that's one of the reasons that there can no longer be a priesthood in Judaism, is because there are no longer any genealogies for the Jews. They can't trace their roots back. You see, the Romans just destroyed everything. If they'd have found these, they'd have been gone. But they were hidden, and hidden well, for 1,900 years. Notice point number C. Or point B, the scrolls are divided into two broad categories, biblical and non-biblical. Okay? And so there's some individuals like us who are very interested in them from the biblical perspective. There's some individuals who are very interested in them from a non-biblical perspective. And we'll talk about one of the documents in just a minute. The scrolls were made of, watch this, animal skins. Did we say that's what some scrolls were made of in the past? We did, didn't we? And papyrus, did we say that? Yes, and there was one of copper. Wow. Remember we said silver, gold, and other types of material? And one of the manuscripts that they found here was made out of copper. Notice this next one. They were written upon with carbon-based ink, from left to right, using no punctuation except for an occasional paragraph indentation. In fact, some of the words many of the words have no spaces between them. You ever tried to read a document that has no spaces between the words? That's a chore, man. Okay? It's a chore. It's unbelievable. Notice point E. The scrolls are, for the most part, written in Hebrew. Why? It's the Old Testament, isn't it? And the Old Testament was written originally in Hebrew. And if we're copying those documents and we're copying copies of those first documents, then they're all written in Hebrew. Now, a few of them are written in Aramaic. Okay? Aramaic was a language that existed in the late BCs. Okay? As the time of Christ is approaching. That language became pretty popular, and some of our New Testament has been translated from the Aramaic, in fact. Okay? Jesus probably was able to speak some Aramaic in addition to Hebrew and Greek. He probably could speak any language he wanted to. I mean, he was God, but those three were very popular during the first century. There's a few, not very many, that were written in Greek. Okay? Now, why is that not surprising that there's some Greek manuscripts? What time frame are we talking about? Talking about 200 BC to 100 AD? Who's in charge, folks? Rome's in charge of the world at that particular time. What was the most prominent language? Greek. Koine Greek and Classical Greek. Okay, and so it's not surprising that there would be a few manuscripts there. Now, notice point F. This is where it really gets interesting. Scholars have identified as many as 900 different documents. Okay, 900 different documents. And the way they have done that is by piecing all of the little fragments together, okay, in a jigsaw puzzle type process. You see, even though they've been preserved, they still what? They still went through some deterioration. Okay, you throw a scroll into a pot and leave it there 1900 years, and then you open it, guess what? It's not a perfect scroll anymore. Okay, it's dried out, some pieces have fallen off. There's one cave, they found 15,000 fragments. One cave, 15,000 fragments. Now you go home and you just lay out 15,000 sheets of paper this afternoon. See how much stuff that is. Okay? So what they had to do is they go in, and what do? Grab the fragments, take them out, take them to a museum, take them to a laboratory, wherever they are, and what do they have to start doing? They got to start piecing all of these fragments together. Look down at that picture right there. See that guy has on that little blue glove, and he's got tweezers in the other hand? Folks, he's putting up fragments on a board, fragments found from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay? Unbelievable. Can you imagine the work it took as an archaeologist, a geologist, to take all that stuff and find it and then take all the time and be meticulous just about doing what? Just putting it together first. Okay? We haven't even started translating. We just got to get it all what? All put together. There's one of the little fragments over there on the right. Okay? Now watch this next point, point G. Fragments of every Hebrew Old Testament book were found except one. Esther. Nothing in any of those fragments that they found have anything from the book of Esther whatsoever. That's interesting, isn't it? When we get into canonization, Esther was a very doubted book for a long time. Does anybody know why? Now, you women who took my course ought to know that. Yeah, the name God is nowhere found in the book of Esther. Okay? Nowhere found. And so, for a long time, that book was doubted as to its authenticity. So, who knows exactly why? Notice point H. Often they have found multiple copies of some of the books. 19 copies of Isaiah, 25 copies of Deuteronomy, 30 copies of Psalms. Now remember, the Essenes did what? Copied Scripture, right? Okay? And so it's not surprising that they'd have numerous copies of these scrolls available. Guys, that was just that was part of their work every day. They'd get up and do what? Just write. Copy those Old Testament documents. Copy those ancient documents that were written. Okay? Notice this next one. The Temple Scroll. Okay, the Temple Scroll is the largest at more than 26 feet long. Okay? That's a pretty long scroll, isn't it? That's about 40 of me put together. Okay? Not quite 40. Okay? Maybe 5 of me put together. Okay? That's a long scroll, isn't it? Okay? And so that was the longest one. Oh man, you got to be kidding me. J. The Isaiah scroll found relatively intact. You hear that? Okay, so that scroll is almost the whole book of Isaiah intact, folks. Okay? Is 1,000 years older than any previous known copy of Isaiah. You think when they started reading that and started dating that, they were just amazed? Wow! The oldest Isaiah we have is from 900 A.D. Now we've got a copy from way back here, 100 year BC. Unbelievable. Okay? And I bet you there were some individuals who said, aha! I bet this copy won't match that copy. Ha ha. Ha ha. Yeah. Now note K down there. There's the Isaiah scroll. See that man? He's reading the Isaiah scroll. That's written in Hebrew. Okay? Yes, sir.
Were they found when they rolled, or
Yes.
they were folded?
No, they were rolled. Most of these were. Yep. A lot of these were rolled. Okay. They weren't in codices. Okay, because they were rolled and stuffed in those jars and stuff. Note this next point. The reason it is believed that the Essene community at Qumran had these is because the traditions outlined in a document called the Community Rule. Now remember, there's some other documents that aren't biblical. Okay, one of them is referred to as the Community Rule. It's a list of the rules for what? For the community. And here's what happens. They match, okay? They match some of the rituals that Flavius Josephus tells about with regard to the Essenes. Now remember, Flavius Josephus is a Jewish historian. Okay? He lived in 100 AD and beyond, and he was telling about the Essenes. Here's the rituals, here's the practices, here's the beliefs of the Essenes. Now they find this scroll, and guess what it is? It's the community rule of who? Of the Essenes, and guess what? The two match. Wow. Okay? So that's why they think this was of Essene origin. Notice point L, you can still see these Dead Sea Scrolls. Most of the Dead Sea Scrolls are located at two sites in Israel. One is the Rockefeller Museum in East Jerusalem, which is under the authority of the Israel Antiques Authority. And guys, notice this. The only way you get in there is to be what? Certified researcher. Ain't none here. Okay, you can't go in that one, but there's another museum there. Okay, it's called the Shrine of the Book of Israel. It's a museum in West Jerusalem, and you can go there. Okay, and you can walk around. And notice how they have that display there. You just walk around and read the scroll. They got that scroll just wrapped around that big display right there, and you just wrap. If you know Hebrew, okay, that may be a drawback for you if you don't. Conclusion very quickly. Remember, these manuscripts predate manuscripts that we had before 1947 by 1,000 years. When the manuscripts of the Dead Sea Scrolls are compared to existing manuscripts, the Old Testament was found to be 99.5% accurate, folks. Accurate. There were very, very few discrepancies. Those who had copied the Old Testament scriptures had copied the manuscripts with extreme accuracy. We can rest assured that, guess what? We have the Old Testament of Moses. Pretty good to know. Yes, ma'am. I'd have to go back and look. I didn't get into all the detail of each one, okay? Because there may have been 2 or 3 copies, and one could have been in Aramaic. It very well may have. Yeah, very well may have. Aramaic and Hebrew are very close as far as the way they speak, okay? It's kind of like English and country. Okay, you know. Any other questions, comments? We're going to get into canonization next week, guys, and it's really going to get gooder. Whew, I dread it. Thank you.